Luton Town are a Premier League team. The Hatters will be welcoming the big boys to Kenilworth Road next season, and I just don't think some people realise how unbelievable this is. Less than 10 years ago, Luton Town were playing conference football, which for those of you who don't know is the 5th tier. Now even this season, the conference does have some fairly well-known teams like Notts County and Wrexham, but it's also the home for such teams as Eastleigh FC, Dorking Wanderers, and actually maybe most infamously of all, Wealdstone Football Club. Big up the Raider. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is surely you couldn't imagine that within 9 years, any of those teams could have climbed the football pyramid and ended up in the Premier League. But that is exactly what Luton Town have done. Now, although Luton Town haven't actually played Premier League football before, that is sort of a technicality. Top flight football did obviously exist before the inception of the Premier League at the start of the 92-93 season, and the season before the rebranding of England's top flight, Luton were playing top flight football. It was a season where recently relegated Leeds United secured their last top flight title, and unfortunately for Luton fans, it was a season to forget, as not only did they get relegated, this is pretty much where their decline started. After dropping out of the top flight, Luton Town spent 4 seasons playing second division football, which by this point had been rebranded as what we all know it as now, the Championship. But this spell in the Championship was definitely a time to forget for Luton fans, as they narrowly avoided relegation in their first 3 seasons after eventually succumbing and finishing rock bottom of the Championship in the 95-96 season, which saw Luton Town drop into the 3rd tier of English football for the first time in nearly 30 years. And the misery wouldn't end there for Luton Town fans, as despite their best efforts, they struggled massively to get out of League One. And eventually, after a 5-year stay, Luton Town hit rock bottom, or at least what they thought was rock bottom. The 2000-2001 season saw Luton Town finish 22nd in League One and therefore drop into League Two, the 4th and bottom tier of English league football. Now, I know we've seen some big clubs tumble down the leagues in my lifetime. Off the top of my head, you know, Pompey come to mind, Bolton Wanderers, Coventry, but to say that a team went from playing top flight football within less than a decade to playing in the basement league of English football is actually crazy. Anyway, it wasn't all bad news for Luton, because they gained promotion at the first time of asking, and this started the initial rise back to glory for Luton Town. They recorded back-to-back mid-table finishes in League One before finishing the 04-05 season as champions and gaining promotion back to the Championship, which meant they'd now be playing in the 2nd tier of English football for the first time in nearly a decade. And now things were looking good once again for Luton Town, and maybe, just maybe, with the right management and a little bit of luck along the way, Luton fans could dream of finding themselves back in the top flight after all these years. And this, for me, is why this story is so mind-blowing, because if Luton had a gained promotion back to the Premier League around this time, for me, it would have been one of the best rise, fall and rise again stories in English football. But that's not what happened. Luton failed to continue their recent success of promotion, and after a 2-year stay in the Championship, they dropped back down into League One. And they didn't stay there long either. They finished rock bottom of League One in their first season, back in the 3rd flight, dropping back down to the 4th and bottom tier of English league football once again. And they say that once you hit rock bottom, the only way's up, well, not if you're a Luton fan. In the 08-09 season, when Fergie's Man United were winning an 11th Premier League title, Chelsea's Nicolas Anelka was lifting the Golden Boot, and Pep's Barcelona team were winning the Champions League, Luton Town were hit with a 30-point deduction by the FA before a ball was even kicked. This was a result of the club going into administration the season before and the complications that then followed that, and the points deduction meant that back-to-back relegations for Luton Town were pretty much a certainty. They appealed it, but it was rejected, and despite the fact that without the 30 points deduction they wouldn't have been relegated, the damage was already done by this point. Luton Town were relegated out of League Two into non-league football. And just when you thought this story couldn't get any madder, it does. Luton Town actually won the Football League trophy at Wembley that season. Now, the Football League trophy is not to be confused with the League Cup, which is a trophy Luton also have won in their history. The Football League trophy is made up of all of the teams that are League One and League Two, which is obviously the 3rd and 4th tier of English football. When I was growing up, it was either known as the LDV Vans Trophy or the Johnston's Paint Trophy. And yeah, in front of 40,000 fans at Wembley Stadium, Luton Town lifted that trophy in the same season as being relegated from the Football League. A couple of months earlier, they'd been playing at Wembley. 2 seasons prior, Luton fans had been welcoming the likes of Leicester City, Sunderland and Leeds United to Kenilworth Road. And now they'd be planning away days to Ebbsfleet, Rushden and Diamonds, Histon and Kettering Town. And to be fair, this wasn't even a blip. It took Luton not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 attempts to gain promotion from non-league football. But after 5 attempts, Luton Town gained promotion from the conference back into the Football League in the 13-14 season. And despite coming close a few times, they actually played 4 seasons of 4th Division football, eventually gaining promotion from League 2 to League 1 at the end of the 17-18 season. And in the 18-19 season, Luton Town meant business. Despite the 3rd tier of English football having some big names in it that year, such as Sunderland and Portsmouth, Luton Town romped to the league title, securing back-to-back promotions, meaning they were back in the Championship 12 years on from their last day, and they were just 1 promotion away from Premier League football. But that 1 promotion is so much easier said than done. Every single one of us knows that the Championship is one of the hardest leagues to get out of in the world, but that would not deter Luton. In the 1920 season, Luton narrowly avoided relegation from the Championship, finishing 3 places but just 3 points ahead of the drop zone. They continued to build next season, becoming an established Championship side and finishing 12th in the table before jumping 6 places in the 2021 season and making the Championship playoffs. But it was heartbreak once again for Luton Town fans after being beat by Huddersfield in the semi-finals and missing out on a trip to Wembley. And maybe more pessimistic Luton fans around this time might have looked at the size of the club and the lack of wealth in the club and thought that maybe this was as good as it gets and they should enjoy the rise they've already had and the memories they've made along the way. But no, Luton were determined to get back to that top flight of English football. After another brilliant season, they finished 3rd this year, making the playoffs and beating Sunderland in the semi-finals to book a date with destiny at Wembley Stadium, where they would face off against Coventry City. Personally, this is one of the most interesting Championship playoff finals that I have ever witnessed. Not so much for what was served on the pitch, but more for what it meant for both teams. Both teams that have played top flight football and fallen down the leagues. Both teams that have been hit with crippling financial woes. And both teams that could benefit from the cash injection of Premier League football like no other team in that league. And we all know what happened. Luton struck first, Coventry equalised, Darboe skied his penalty, and Luton became a Premier League team. Now, I'm very aware that I brushed over a lot here. The impact that manager John Steele had on Andre Gray in firing them out of the National League and back into league football. The heartbreak of so many failed playoff attempts. The outrage and backlash from the fans after having sanctions opposed upon them. The comings and goings of Nathan Jones. The fact that Pele Roddick became the first player to climb from the Conference League to the Premier League with the same club. And most of all, the fact that they did all of this with modest ownership rather than being a club that had had a takeover and been injected with massive amounts of cash. But the rollercoaster journey is not over for Luton Town yet. They need to prepare for what the Premier League has in store for them. The bookies have them as odds-on favourites to go down. Kenilworth Road needs a £10 million redevelopment just to comply with Premier League regulations, and they need to invest in the squad that at the moment has an estimated combined annual wage bill of around £6 million. That's about £2 million less than Kai Havertz on his own earns per season. There's honestly so much more I could talk about with this fairy tale Luton Town story, but I want to hear from Luton Town fans. Tell me in the comments what has been your favourite memory along the way, and let me know, how do you guys think you're going to cope in the Premier League next season? I'll put it out there now. I really hope you're going to stay up. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications every time one of my videos goes live. I'll see you in the next one.